If your spouse is dealing with a porn addiction, you know the challenges that a family suffers through. Our next guest has struggled through this ordeal a couple of times. Let's welcome Heather Westover to the table. Welcome.
Thank you for coming, Heather.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hi,
I'm
Heather.
honored to be here.
Good.
I appreciate
We're
it.
glad. Thank you for sharing your table.
Of course.
Yes. So you come with a really deep, kind of scary topic. I
Yeah.
feel like that not a lot of people dare talk about.
It's very taboo to talk about.
It is.
Yes.
It is. So share us a little bit about your story and why you brought it to us.
Well, when my first spouse was, I didn't know what pornography really was.
Okay.
You know, kind of talked about it growing up as a kid. Don't look at naughty pictures. Like, that was the extent
Totally,
of it, right? And then my first exposure to it was when I was 24, and my spouse at the time came home and he'd lost his job for viewing it at work.
Oh.
And I was like, wait, you have a pornography problem? Like, I had no idea. It wasn't disclosed to me. I was nothing other than just speechless.
And devastated,
And
probably.
devastated.
Yeah.
You know, it was hard because there was no one to talk to. I remember talking to my parents, and my dad was like, just love him. That's what you need to do, just love him. And I bless my dad's heart. He didn't know any better either.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, and leaders at the time, church, I remember hearing other women saying, oh, if that happened to my husband, like no one knew. I would divorce him in a heartbeat. And I was thinking, you have no idea. And there was nothing out there. I didn't know of groups. I didn't have books. It was me kind of by myself, and I didn't know what it was. And I was told that the addiction was my fault because I wasn't enough. My body was the wrong shape because I wasn't good enough in
From
the bedroom.
him or from others?
From him.
Okay.
You know, this is your fault. So, you know, and I'd go to ask people for advice. They're like, well, you know, maybe bring some lingerie that might fix it, you know, kind of situation.
That's really devastating. I mean, think of how that impacts your self-esteem and
It
who
was
you are.
Like your problem is because of me.
Right. And I knew it was a problem, but I didn't realize how much of a problem until I really started my healing journey with my second husband. So 15 years in that relationship, really devastating. We ended up separating, not necessarily because of that, but that was, you know, one of those things. And I was on a dating app, and I was swiping through, and this guy came up with this big old scruffy beard, and I was like, and no, not even interested. And I had this overwhelming feeling. It said, go back, you gotta go back, you gotta go back. And I'm looking at this picture thinking, what does heaven know that I don't? Because
That's not for me.
that's not, no. And I ended up texting him, started texting, and that night, we had been texting through the night and the next day, and I was kind of liking this person. He was friendly, he was fun. I thought, oh, this will be fun to go on a date with someone not scary, because social media dating is scary. And they, all of a sudden it got really quiet in our chat, and I had this overwhelming thought that said, he's going to tell you he has an addiction. And I thought, are you kidding? I just did this. Why in the world would you put me in this situation again? And sure enough, the next thing he said is, I have the addiction, here's my past story, I'm divorced, da da da. Like, he laid it all on the table. And
So he's telling you this up front.
This is within the first 30 hours of texting.
Wow.
Which is unheard of in the
Usually that's something
addiction world.
you don't put that on the table.
But he must have been in a place where he's like, hey, I'm trying to
Yeah, and he'd
go
been
through
the
it.
gamut. You know, he had been divorced. He lost everything. You know, he was homeless for a few months. Like, the poor man had to go through basically rock bottom. And then he was kind of building himself back up. And I remember thinking, why would you do this to me? Why would you put me there? And the very next thing he said is, and just so you know, this is my addiction. At no point is this addiction ever your responsibility. And
Whoa.
I was shocked, and I didn't know what he meant, because I came across, it was my fault. That's the way I'd been raised, the way I had grown up in my first marriage. And so it's become one of those things that he's very open about. I remember the first time I took him to church, and he was talking about it. I'm like, would you stop talking? Shh.
We don't have to tell everyone right off the bat.
tell anybody about this.
That's going to mean something different for different people. People who've been through it are like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad there's someone else.
Yes.
And people who don't know are like, oh, I would divorce them.
Exactly.
Right.
And so that's where we get a lot of pushback, because we're very open and we've talked about our story on different platforms because we think it is so important. Because no one should have to go through it the way I did, where it's your fault and you have nobody to talk to.
Right.
You should suffer silently.
So what happened? Like, I mean, you stayed in the first relationship or first marriage for 15 years, you said, right?
Yeah.
So what was the breaking point?
The breaking point for me was a combination of, we had a hard time just keeping work.
Okay.
And lack of motivation. It was, I could see myself progressing and going places and wanting to achieve great things, and he was very content to just kind of be home and not go anywhere, do a lot of things, you know, and I mean, I wish him the best. Like, I honestly hope someday he figures it out, because the man's brilliant.
Okay.
I married a genius. I tell him he's dumb, but like, dumb as a box of rocks, but he's a genius.
Different ways, yeah.
But
So then what brought you to this new relationship and saying, I'm on board to try this?
honestly, I don't know if you can say it, God. That is the only reason I agreed to this relationship, is from day one, that feeling of going, you need to trust this. And I was like, are you sure? And always feeling extremely at peace. You know, of course, then I told my family about his addiction. My parents were like, what are you doing, Heather?
Right.
This is not a great idea. You know, so one of the things that Josh and I, my husband and I, have really worked at is being open about it and talking, helping people understand addiction is not, no matter what the person who is addicted says, it is not the other person's fault. Even if they tell you, oh, I'm doing this because you're not fulfilling some need.
Right.
That's not accurate. The other thing we are learning about addictions, and what's amazing is, I mean, like pornography, 85% of men and 75% of women have looked at pornography at some point in their lifetime.
Well, if you've watched TV,
Right.
at some point,
Right.
you've seen different levels of it.
Right. And with our technology, I just feel like it's
everywhere.
easier
It's
and easier.
My husband's
Yeah.
like, in less than 3 minutes, I could get you hardcore pornography if I, you know,
Yeah.
wanted
Wow.
to.
Unfortunately.
But this idea that people that are struggling with addiction are doing so because there's an underlying pain going on. There's an underlying hurt going on, and they use it to numb out, to find acceptance. That was what my husband started viewing pornography at the age of 10. Back in the days when it was hard, you know, like hard to find out. It was
fun in
a
a
lot harder.
magazine.
Yeah, exactly. And he was trying to escape from things that hurt. And so for us, when he, we have a rule that within, it's normally within a few hours that he'll call me or text me and say, hey, I slipped up, I relapsed, whatever word he decides to use, which is pretty amazing, because I came from also a relationship of a lot of, it was very hidden.
Yeah.
You don't talk about it. So when he discloses, then he, we can talk about it. And I can look at him as a person instead of, this addiction is attacking me. This addiction is telling me I'm not enough, because that's what I believed. And no one, male or female, anyone should ever have to feel that way, you know? And so that's been really cool. And then we got involved in a program called Warrior Heart.
Okay.
Have you heard of that?
No, I have not.
Most amazing program. Most amazing program out there on the planet. It is, a lot of times got people, men that have addictions will go, but it's not just for like pornography or alcohol or really any addiction. It's a 3-day program where they take you up into the mountains and they help men reconnect to God. And it is the most powerful 3 days. I love when my husband goes, because I love to hear the stories and the miracles that happen.
So is this, how often does this happen?
This year it's actually happened 9 times.
Wow.
And the last year we had 4. So
Wow.
it is growing exponentially. It's now all over the United States. They're even doing one in Alaska. I'm trying to get myself invited.
Oh, yeah.
They tell me I'm not allowed to come. But they go and they really focus on, it's non-denominational, but it's just connect with God. And if you can connect with God and you understand why you're important and how much you're loved and how God actually sees you, your addiction has less and less pull. Because a lot of times for addictions, people are looking for validation somewhere else. I want you to approve of me.
Well, and it also turns, so I study this because I study mental health.
Oh, yeah.
But it turns you, there's a couple things that are really important what you're saying. Number one is honesty. The honesty will suffocate the addiction.
Yes.
So the fact that he is honest and constantly honest, it cannot continue to get worse,
Right.
which is a really good point. But I know there's also like a 12-step too that they have for, like they have it for alcoholics.
Yes.
But they have it for sexual addiction. And what's interesting is the first step is acknowledging that you have a problem.
And that's the hardest step.
So
I think.
for
100%.
people, so
Put it
for
out in the
someone at
open.
home who's like, okay, this is happening, and I don't have anyone to talk about or talk to, you know, remember about that they need to first recognize this is a problem, and pornography actually makes you look at people as things rather than people, and it disconnects you from real relationships. And that's what makes it so much more devastating. It amplifies whatever that underlying issue is, like what you're saying.
Yeah.
It just amplifies that.
And I think that's where it gets fed on, where you walk away feeling I'm not enough or
Yeah.
I'm broken. It really has nothing to do
It
with
devastates you as a wife,
Right.
and him also.
Yes.
So what would you tell couples or a woman or a man that may think that they're dealing with this or know that they are?
First of all, there's hope. Don't give up. That's my biggest thing. If you can get your husband, there's actually a women's sisters program called Heart of a Woman, which helps with women who have trauma in this department, really any trauma. But or Warrior Heart. If you can get to Warrior Heart for the men, that's awesome. SAL, which is the Sexual Addiction 12-Step Program, is really amazing.
yeah.
But most importantly, get them involved with a group of people they can reach out to. My husband's a member through the Warrior Heart. He has 6 different text groups, and anytime they're my favorite things to read, because you will see these guys reaching out and saying, I need a prayer today. Today I'm really struggling. And doing that not only for yourself as the one who's struggling and the person who has the addiction, get a community, get a group of people, because of that. You don't have to do this alone. That was the thing I learned, and that was the hardest for me for 15 years, is I thought, it's all on me. I have to fix the world.
Right. Can people reach out to you? Do you have any program, or are you just sharing your story with us?
Mostly just sharing this story.
Okay.
But Warrior Heart, or A Heart of a Woman, also there's one, a podcast called Rise Up Restored, which is the female trauma survivor edition. That my story is actually on there.
Okay.
So neat.
And then there's one for men called Unashamed and Unafraid podcast. And that is about men dealing with their addictions. And both, they can get you connected to Warrior Heart, they can get connected to people. I'm happy to share my information. My husband, we always share our numbers, because if anyone needs help, we're there to.
That's awesome.
Be willing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for sharing.
Really,
Of course.
thank you.
Yeah, that's an uncomfortable
Yep.
topic. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Unless you're at our house, then it's normal, apparently.
Like
That's
it.
so good.
Well, thank you.
There's going to be
Thank
some
you.
people at home, I'm sure, that are going to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I hope so, because there's no
So-
place to be. So.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you very much.